The Dragon Emperor watched the human Waitress carry his disabled baby dragon, and his life changed forever. The sun was setting over the Dragon Empire, painting the sky with streaks of orange and gold. From the high balcony of his palace, Emperor Calith watched silently. His eyes, sharp and golden, scanned the city below. The Dragon Empire was vast and powerful, a place where dragons ruled the skies and humans lived mostly in the lower districts. The streets bustled with activity as humans carried out their work, dragons soared above, and merchants shouted their wares. But Calith's gaze was not on the usual crowds. Today his thoughts were with his youngest hatchling, Zephyr. Zephyr was unlike the other dragonlings. While his siblings were strong, fierce, and able to glide gracefully across the clouds, Zephyr struggled to keep up. His wings were smaller, his body frail, and his movements clumsy. Even the simplest flight exercises left him exhausted. Calith had watched his hatchling's struggles with a mixture of frustration and concern. In the Dragon Empire, weakness was often frowned upon. A dragon that could not fly or fight well was considered useless. But something about Zephyr tugged at Calith in a way he did not fully understand. As Calith leaned on the balcony, his sharp eyes caught sight of someone unusual in the marketplace. She was a human, young and small compared to the dragons around her. Her hair, the color of chestnuts, fell loosely over her shoulders, and her eyes shone with determination. She carried baskets filled with goods, balancing them carefully as she navigated through the crowd. She did not flinch when dragons brushed past her. Instead, she moved with confidence, her steps purposeful. Calith frowned slightly. Humans were often timid, fearful of dragons, and kept to themselves. But this one, she moved differently. There was courage in her stride, a strength that came not from muscles or claws but from her spirit. Calith felt a strange curiosity stirring inside him. Suddenly, a loud cry echoed from the palace courtyard. Calith's heart clenched. Zephyr. The hatchling had wandered too close to the edge of the training platform, unsure of his balance. The other dragonlings circled above, their laughter sharp and teasing. Zephyr's small body trembled with fear, and for a moment it seemed he might fall. Then Calith saw her. The human girl stopped in the marketplace, her eyes widening as she saw the struggling dragon. Without hesitation, she ran toward the courtyard. The crowd parted as she moved quickly, carrying herself with surprising strength. She did not hesitate or show fear, even as Zephyr's cries grew louder. Calith's wings twitched with interest. He descended from the balcony, invisible to all but the girl, curious to see what she would do. From his vantage point, he saw her reach Zephyr just as he stumbled forward. With gentle hands, she scooped him up, holding him close to her chest. The tiny dragon calmed instantly, his trembling body relaxing against her. The Emperor's heart, so used to the pride and power of dragons, felt something unfamiliar. Respect. Admiration. He had seen many dragons lift their hatchlings, but none with such careful attention and tenderness. The girl's face was calm, determined, and full of kindness. She spoke to Zephyr in soft tones, words the Emperor could not understand, yet the effect was clear. Zephyr's fear melted away, replaced with a growing trust in the human who held him. Calith stepped closer, now unable to resist revealing himself. The air around him shimmered as his presence became visible. The human girl froze for a moment, her eyes wide as she looked up at the massive dragon before her. He was magnificent, scales shimmering like molten gold, wings spanning wide enough to block the sun, and eyes that glowed with a golden light. Yet despite his fearsome appearance, there was no anger or threat in his gaze, only curiosity. You are the Emperor," she whispered, her voice steady despite the awe in her eyes. Calith inclined his head slightly. "I am," he rumbled, his deep voice shaking the air. "And who are you that you carry my hatchling without fear?" The girl, whose name was Leora, held Zephyr tighter and met his gaze. "I am Leora. I work in the inn near the marketplace. I care for him. He is small, weak, and scared, but I believe he can grow stronger if someone shows him patience and courage." Calith's golden eyes narrowed. "Patience, courage, you speak as if he is not weak, yet he cannot fly as the others do. Strength is everything in my empire. Weakness is dangerous." Leora shook her head. "Strength is not just in wings or claws. It is in heart, in will, in the courage to keep trying even when the world seems impossible. Zephyr is small now, but he has that courage. He needs someone to guide him, not scorn him." For the first time in many years, Calith felt a pang of uncertainty. He had ruled with power, expecting obedience and strength, yet here was a human who saw potential where he saw weakness. She was fearless, clever, and compassionate, qualities the Emperor had rarely acknowledged in humans. Days passed, and Calith continued to observe. Leora visited the palace courtyard every morning, carrying Zephyr in her arms. She spoke to him, encouraged him, and gently guided him through exercises that challenged him without frightening him. Calith watched silently from above, fascinated by the bond growing between them. Zephyr, once timid and frightened, began to show signs of improvement. His wings grew steadier, his steps more confident, and his trust in Leora deepened. The palace staff whispered among themselves. They had never seen a human treat a dragon with such care, nor a dragon hatchling respond with such trust. Some dragons scoffed, calling it foolish to depend on humans, but Calith did not scoff. He only watched, learning more each day. One afternoon, a strong wind blew across the palace courtyard. Zephyr, eager to try flying, attempted to leap from a low balcony. He faltered, and the wind pushed him backward. Before he could fall, Leora's hands were there, catching him effortlessly. Her face was calm, her eyes bright with determination. Calith felt a strange warmth in his chest. He realized that humans possessed a different kind of strength, one that did not rely on fire, claws, or scales, but on courage, care, and intelligence. Leora's strength was subtle yet unstoppable. He descended from his balcony again, this time stepping fully into the courtyard. Zephyr squeaked in surprise but did not struggle, sensing the Emperor's presence as protective rather than threatening. Calith approached Leora and Zephyr slowly. "You have shown courage beyond what I expected from a human," he said. "And Zephyr, he has changed under your guidance. Tell me, human, why do you risk yourself for him?" Leora looked up, meeting his gaze without fear. "Because I believe every life matters. Even a small dragon like Zephyr deserves a chance to grow. Even someone small can make a difference." Calith was silent for a long moment. The city noises faded in his ears. He had ruled for centuries, and he had seen countless dragons rise and fall, strong and weak alike. But never had he seen such determination, such courage from a human. For the first time, Calith felt something he had not felt in centuries: hope. Hope not just for Zephyr, but for a future where dragons and humans might learn from each other. He realized that the Empire had been strong because of dragons' power, but perhaps it could grow stronger if it embraced the courage, cleverness, and resilience of humans as well. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting a warm glow over the palace, Calith watched Leora and Zephyr together. The small human held the fragile hatchling with unwavering care, whispering words of encouragement. Zephyr looked up at her with wide eyes, filled with trust and curiosity. The Emperor's heart stirred. For the first time, he saw that strength was not only in fire and wings, but in patience, courage, and compassion. And he knew deep down that his life and his empire would never be the same. Calith spread his massive wings, the golden light of the setting sun glinting off his scales. He let out a low, rumbling sound, neither roar nor threat, but acknowledgement. Leora looked up at him, understanding that he was no longer just the Emperor of Dragons, but an observer, a student, and perhaps, in time, a friend. The city below went about its evening routine, oblivious to the quiet transformation happening in the palace courtyard. But Calith knew. He had seen human courage up close, and he had seen a dragon hatchling respond to care and patience. The seeds of change had been planted, and he was ready to see how far they might grow. As night fell and the stars began to shine, Calith remained in the courtyard, watching Leora and Zephyr. The wind carried the faint sound of laughter and tiny roars. And for the first time in a long time, the Dragon Emperor felt something new. A sense of wonder, hope, and a small but powerful spark that would change his life forever. The morning sun rose over the Dragon Empire, spilling golden light across the palace towers. Inside the grand courtyard, Emperor Calith watched silently from his balcony. Zephyr, his smallest and weakest hatchling, was awake and stretching his tiny wings. Beside him stood Leora, the human waitress, calm and confident as always. She hummed a soft tune, speaking to the dragonling in words Calith could not understand. Yet the effect was clear. Zephyr's small body stiffened and then relaxed, his nervous eyes now curious and bright. Calith's golden gaze followed every movement. He had watched Leora for days, and her dedication amazed him. She carried Zephyr effortlessly, guiding him through exercises that were difficult even for some young dragons. She spoke to him gently, laughed when he made mistakes, and never showed impatience, even when the hatchling stumbled or cried. Calith had ruled the Dragon Empire for centuries, and he had never seen a creature, human or dragon, demonstrate such unwavering patience. Curiosity gnawed at the Emperor. Humans had always been creatures of fear and weakness, prone to fleeing or hiding from dragons, but Leora was different. She did not act out of fear. She acted out of courage and determination. Calith realized that perhaps he had underestimated humanity. There was strength in her, and he wanted to understand it. That morning, he descended from the balcony, landing silently in the courtyard. His massive wings stirred the air, yet Leora did not flinch. Instead, she turned, smiling politely, and held Zephyr closer to her chest. "You are early today," Calith rumbled, his deep voice echoing like thunder. "Are you not afraid to be near me?" Leora shook her head. "I have nothing to fear," she replied firmly. "I only want to help Zephyr. He trusts me, and if I am afraid, he will never learn courage." Calith's eyes narrowed, and a low rumble vibrated in his throat. He had expected fear, trembling, maybe even defiance. But Leora's calm resolve intrigued him. "You speak of courage as if it is a choice," he said. "Yet most humans run when dragons approach. Why are you different?" Leora lifted Zephyr slightly, letting him stretch his small wings. "I have seen humans face challenges far bigger than themselves. I have seen people lose everything and still rise again. I have seen them fight for others, even when they themselves were afraid. Strength does not always come from size or fire. Sometimes it comes from heart." Calith considered her words carefully. For centuries, dragons had relied on their size, strength, and power. They had ruled through fear and dominance. But as he watched Leora, he wondered if there was another kind of strength, one that did not need fire or claws, one that could move even the most stubborn of hearts. Over the next few days, Calith continued to observe Leora closely. She arrived at the palace every morning, carrying Zephyr in her arms, guiding him through small flights and careful exercises. Sometimes she whispered softly to him, sometimes she clapped and laughed when he succeeded. Zephyr began to respond, his small wings flapping more confidently, his trembling steps becoming steadier. The Emperor noticed something remarkable. Zephyr's improvement was not fast, but it was consistent. Every day he seemed to gain a little more confidence, a little more courage. And Leora was always there, supporting him, never scolding, never forcing. Her strength came from care, understanding, and patience, qualities Calith had never thought could shape a dragon's future. One afternoon, Calith finally approached Leora while Zephyr rested in her arms. "Human," he said, "you have been with Zephyr for many days. You have shown patience that even I find difficult. Tell me, why do you care for him so deeply?" Leora looked up, her eyes meeting his golden gaze without fear. "Because every life deserves a chance," she said simply. "Zephyr is small and weak, but he is not nothing. He can grow strong if someone believes in him, and everyone deserves someone to believe in them." The Emperor was silent. He had ruled for centuries, expecting obedience and fear from all creatures, dragons and humans alike. But here was a human, showing him a kind of power he had never understood. It was quiet, subtle, and unstoppable. And for the first time, Calith felt something unfamiliar: admiration, respect, even hope. That night, Calith could not sleep. He sat atop his balcony, looking down at the glowing city below. His mind wandered back to Leora and Zephyr. He realized that humans had abilities dragons could never match. They could see weakness and treat it with care. They could face danger with courage, even when their bodies were small and fragile. And they could teach even the strongest dragons lessons about patience and determination. The next morning, Calith decided to test the bond between Leora and Zephyr. He summoned the hatchling to the highest balcony in the palace, a place Zephyr had never flown before. The winds were strong and the drop below was terrifying. Zephyr's small body trembled and his cries echoed through the courtyard. Leora approached him calmly, her arms steady. "You can do this," she whispered, holding him securely. "I will not let you fall. Trust me, trust yourself." For a long moment, Zephyr froze, unsure. Calith watched silently from a distance. The Emperor knew most dragons would scold a hatchling for fear, but Leora did not. She offered support, encouragement, and belief. Slowly, Zephyr lifted himself, his wings flapping uncertainly. Step by step, he began to glide across the balcony under her careful guidance. Calith felt a surge of pride he had never known. The hatchling, once weak and trembling, now moved with determination. And the human, the one he had dismissed at first as small and fragile, was the reason. Her courage, patience, and care had transformed Zephyr. Over the next weeks, Leora continued her training with Zephyr. She introduced him to exercises that challenged his balance, strength, and courage. She encouraged him to interact with other dragonlings, helping him face his fears. Zephyr, once shy and timid, began to hold his head higher, his eyes brighter, his wings stronger. The Emperor observed quietly, learning more with each passing day. He realized that humans could teach dragons many things: patience, courage, and even humility. He began to wonder if perhaps the Empire could be stronger if dragons learned from humans, rather than only ruling over them. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Calith approached Leora while Zephyr rested in her arms. The city below glowed with lanterns, and the air was filled with the soft sounds of the evening. "You have done more than I expected," Calith said quietly. "Zephyr is growing stronger because of you. I see now that humans are not weak. They have courage that even dragons sometimes lack." Leora smiled softly. "Thank you, Emperor, but it is not just me. Zephyr has courage too. He only needed someone to believe in him." Calith nodded slowly. The Emperor's mind was full of thoughts he had never considered. Perhaps strength was not only in wings, claws, and fire. Perhaps it was also in patience, care, and the courage to keep trying. For the first time, Calith felt hope that the Dragon Empire could be more than just a place of power and fear. Hope that dragons and humans could learn from each other, grow together, and create something stronger than either could achieve alone. As night fell, Calith watched Leora carry Zephyr back to the palace nursery. The little dragon clung to her, his eyes full of trust. And Calith, the mighty Dragon Emperor, realized that his life, and the future of his empire, had begun to change, all because a human girl had dared to believe in a tiny, fragile dragon. He spread his massive wings and let out a low, thoughtful rumble. The city below was quiet now, but Calith knew the world had shifted, even if only slightly. In that quiet courtyard, a seed had been planted, a seed that would grow into courage, hope, and a bond between species that could change the fate of the empire forever. Calith stayed until the stars filled the sky, watching Leora and Zephyr disappear into the palace halls. And for the first time in centuries, the Dragon Emperor felt something entirely new: the gentle, powerful spark of trust, friendship, and hope. The morning sun rose softly over the Dragon Empire, its golden light glinting on the palace towers. In the courtyard below, Zephyr, the tiny dragon hatchling, stretched his small wings with careful determination. He was stronger than before, though still far from the might of his older siblings. Beside him, Leora, the human waitress, crouched low, her hands guiding him gently. "Take it slowly, Zephyr," she said in her calm voice. "You can do this. I am right here with you." Zephyr's tiny claws scraped against the polished stone of the courtyard as he tried to lift himself into the air. His wings flapped hesitantly, and he wobbled for a moment. Then, with a careful push, he lifted off the ground, hovering just a few inches above the surface. Leora's face lit up with a smile. "You see, you can do it. Keep going," she cheered softly. High above, Emperor Calith watched from his balcony. His golden eyes gleamed as he observed the growing bond between the human and his hatchling. He had never seen patience and courage displayed in such a way. The Emperor had always ruled through power, strength, and dominance, but Leora's method was different. She used care, understanding, and quiet persistence. Calith's claws itched to test her strength, to challenge her, but a part of him resisted. He realized that her courage was not the kind that needed proving through force. It was deeper, stronger, the courage of heart and mind, and it was having an effect on Zephyr. Over the next few days, Leora introduced new exercises for Zephyr. She taught him to balance on narrow ledges, to flap his wings in controlled bursts, and to navigate around small obstacles she had set up in the courtyard. At first, Zephyr faltered often, his confidence wavering. But every time, Leora was there, steady and encouraging, never scolding, never pushing him too hard. One afternoon, Calith decided to speak with Leora directly. He descended into the courtyard, the ground shaking slightly with each step. Zephyr squeaked in surprise but did not panic. He had grown used to Calith's presence, and thanks to Leora's guidance, now recognized that the Emperor was not a threat, at least not today. "You have been teaching him well," Calith said, his deep voice rolling through the courtyard. "He is stronger than when I last observed him. You have patience, human. Few humans possess it, yet you wield it as if it were second nature. Leora straightened and met the Emperor's gaze. Patience comes from care, she said simply. I want him to succeed. I believe he can. He just needs guidance and trust. Calith nodded slowly. There was truth in her words, and he felt a strange admiration stirring inside him. For centuries, he had valued strength above all else. Dragons were expected to fight, to dominate, to survive. But now he saw that strength could take another form. It could be quiet, subtle, and yet far more powerful than raw power. Over the next week, the courtyard became a place of training and laughter. Zephyr learned to leap from small ledges, flap his wings more confidently, and navigate around obstacles with growing skill. Leora encouraged him gently, praising each success and comforting him through failures. The Emperor observed silently, fascinated by the progress. One morning, Leora decided to introduce a new challenge. She led Zephyr to the palace garden where the paths were narrow and uneven. Small trees and rocks created obstacles for the tiny dragon to navigate. Remember, she said, holding Zephyr close, I will be with you. You can do this. Trust yourself. Zephyr trembled but trusted Leora. Slowly, he stepped forward, flapping his wings carefully. He wobbled on a narrow stone path, but Leora steadied him, whispering words of encouragement. Step by step, he made his way through the garden, learning to balance and coordinate his wings. Calith watched silently from above, his pride growing. Zephyr's confidence was increasing, and the hatchling's small victories brought joy not only to Leora, but to the Emperor as well. He realized that humans could inspire dragons in ways that dragons alone could not. Their strength came from their belief, courage, and perseverance, qualities Calith had never valued enough before. As the days went by, Zephyr began to explore on his own. He would leap from low ledges, hover for a few moments, and then return to Leora's waiting hands. Sometimes he stumbled or lost balance, but he never gave up. Leora's constant support allowed him to try again and again. One evening, Calith approached the pair while they rested in the garden. Zephyr was curled in Leora's lap, tired but happy after a long day of practice. You have accomplished much, Calith said, his deep voice echoing softly. I have watched him grow stronger because of you. I did not expect this. Leora smiled. Thank you, Emperor. Zephyr has courage. He only needed someone to help him see it. Calith nodded slowly. He realized that perhaps dragons had relied too much on strength alone. Humans, in their smallness and seeming fragility, possessed qualities that dragons could not ignore: empathy, courage, patience, and intelligence. Leora had taught him a lesson without even trying to. The bond between Leora and Zephyr continued to grow. The hatchling learned to trust her completely, following her instructions without hesitation. He explored the palace courtyard with growing confidence, sometimes even attempting short flights across open spaces. Leora was always there to catch him if he fell, encouraging him to try again. Calith observed quietly, often thinking about the future. He realized that the Dragon Empire could benefit from understanding humans better, learning from their ingenuity and courage. For centuries, dragons had dominated humans, but perhaps a partnership could bring greater strength to both species. One afternoon, a group of young dragonlings came to watch Zephyr's practice. They circled him, their laughter sharp and teasing. Zephyr hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Leora stepped forward, holding him gently. Do not be afraid, she whispered. You are learning, you are brave. Remember, courage comes from trying, not from being perfect. Zephyr flapped his wings with determination, facing his siblings despite their teasing. He stumbled once, but Leora steadied him. Slowly, he grew bolder, his confidence shining through. Calith's golden eyes gleamed with pride. Even in the face of mockery, Zephyr did not give up. And the credit belonged to the human who had guided him. That evening, Calith returned to his chambers, deep in thought. He had ruled for centuries, expecting obedience and strength, yet he had learned a new kind of power. It was not fire, claws, or dominance. It was care, patience, and the courage to keep trying even when the odds were against you. He realized that humans could teach dragons valuable lessons, and if the Dragon Empire embraced that knowledge, it could grow stronger in ways Calith had never imagined. The next morning, Calith observed a new development. Zephyr had attempted his first short flight without Leora holding him. He wobbled and flapped, unsure at first, but he kept going. Leora watched nervously, ready to catch him if he fell. Zephyr hovered in the air for a few heartbeats, then landed safely on the ground. Calith felt a rush of emotion. The hatchling had faced his fears, trusted himself, and succeeded, and Leora had made it possible. Her belief in Zephyr, her patience, and her courage had transformed a fragile dragonling into a brave young dragon. For the first time in his long life, Calith felt gratitude toward a human. He had underestimated their strength for centuries. But Leora had shown him that true courage did not always roar. Sometimes it whispered, guided, and persisted quietly until it changed everything. That night, as the stars filled the sky, Calith stood on his balcony, watching Leora and Zephyr from a distance. The little dragon curled in her arms, resting after another day of practice. Calith's heart swelled with pride and admiration. He knew that this human, small as she was, had changed the course of his empire in ways he could not yet measure. And in the quiet of the night, the Emperor realized something important. Strength was not only in wings, claws, or fire. True strength could come from the heart, from belief, and from the courage to stand firm in the face of fear. The bond between Leora and Zephyr had grown stronger, and in turn, Calith's understanding of the world had grown as well. He knew that the future of the Dragon Empire might depend on learning from humans, on embracing their courage, and on nurturing the qualities that dragons often overlooked. As the wind whispered through the palace towers, Calith spread his massive wings and let out a low, thoughtful rumble. It was not a roar, not a demand, not a warning. It was a sound of reflection, of hope, and of promise. The Dragon Emperor had witnessed something extraordinary, and he knew that this was only the beginning. For the first time in centuries, Calith felt a spark of excitement for the future. And it all began with a human girl, a fragile hatchling, and the quiet, unstoppable power of patience and courage. The morning sun barely touched the palace towers when a warning bell rang across the Dragon Empire. Its deep, echoing chime carried through the air, vibrating in every stone and scale. Calith's golden eyes snapped open. He had sensed trouble, a disturbance in the skies above the western mountains. His claws dug into the balcony edge as he watched distant shadows moving against the horizon. A neighboring dragon clan, one that had always been jealous of Calith's empire, was approaching. Their wings beat the sky with a thunderous rhythm, and their roar carried across the valleys like a warning of war. Calith's chest tightened. His empire had faced attacks before, but this one was different. They were not coming for territory alone, they were coming for Zephyr. The news spread quickly through the palace. The young hatchling, now stronger but still small compared to other dragons, became a target for those who wished to humiliate Calith. The palace guards gathered, tension crackling in the air. The older dragonlings circled anxiously, ready to defend their home, but uncertainty lingered. Even dragons, fierce and proud, were sometimes unsure when facing unexpected threats. Calith's gaze turned to the courtyard. Zephyr trembled at the noise and the rising winds, uncertain what to do. Leora knelt beside him, her arms steady and calm. "Zephyr," she whispered, "you are safe. I am here. We will face this together." Calith, watching from above, felt a strange emotion stirring in him, trust. He had ruled for centuries, but now he realized that perhaps brute strength alone would not save Zephyr. The humans, with their cleverness and courage, could help in ways dragons could not imagine. He descended into the courtyard, landing silently before Leora and Zephyr. The ground shook beneath him, but Leora did not flinch. Instead, she stood taller, her chest firm and her eyes bright. "Emperor Calith," she said, "we can defend Zephyr, but we must use strategy, not just strength. The dragons attacking us are strong. If we fight them head-on, we may lose." Calith tilted his head, intrigued. "Strategy?" he asked. "Explain, human." Leora pointed to the courtyard and palace structures. "We can use traps, obstacles, and distractions. The attackers expect brute force. If we think carefully, we can outsmart them. Zephyr can help too. Even small dragons can be clever in the right situation." Calith's golden eyes narrowed in thought. He had never considered humans as capable of battlefield strategy. They were small, fragile, and often relied on dragons for protection. But Leora's confidence and knowledge impressed him. Perhaps humans, working with dragons, could achieve feats dragons alone might fail at. The first wave of enemy dragons arrived just as Leora predicted. Their claws scraped the palace walls, and their roars echoed across the courtyard. The older dragonlings prepared to fight, muscles tensed, fire ready in their throats. But Calith allowed Leora to take charge. "Place the baskets and barrels here," she instructed, pointing to narrow paths and entrances. Drag them across the courtyard. They will trip over them, lead them into the traps we prepared. The palace staff, a mix of humans and dragons, moved quickly under her direction. Zephyr, small but brave, flapped beside her, ready to help in any way he could. The attackers were fierce and confident, but Leora's clever arrangements slowed them down. Dragons tripped over obstacles, collided with one another, and became disoriented. Calith watched, impressed. Human ingenuity was proving just as powerful as dragon strength, and Zephyr, guided by Leora, began to play his part. He darted between attackers, using his small size to sneak into spaces larger dragons could not reach. He flared bursts of fire to distract and signal, helping coordinate the palace defenders. The battle raged through the morning. Enemy dragons tried to overwhelm the palace with sheer power, but Leora's planning kept them off balance. She moved through the chaos, calm and steady, directing defenders and guiding Zephyr. The hatchling, once timid and weak, now responded with courage, bravery, and cleverness. Calith fought alongside his older dragonlings, but he often glanced at Leora in amazement. She had predicted the enemy's movements, exploited their weaknesses, and used every advantage the palace offered. Even his centuries of battle experience could not match her careful calculations and quick thinking. At one point, a large enemy dragon charged directly toward Zephyr. The hatchling froze for a moment, panic flashing in his eyes. Leora did not hesitate. She dove, scooping him up in her arms, moving with agility that surprised even Calith. She placed him safely on a high balcony, then returned to her position, directing the defenders with calm precision. Calith's golden eyes softened. Courage, he realized, was not just about fighting or fire. It was about facing danger, protecting others, and thinking clearly when the world seemed chaotic. Leora had shown him a kind of courage that dragons often lacked, and Zephyr, small and fragile, had learned to trust that courage and act with it. As the battle continued, the enemy dragons began to falter. Their confidence wavered in the face of clever traps, coordinated distractions, and the surprising courage of a small hatchling and his human companion. Leora's strategy had turned the tide. Step by step, the attackers were driven back, retreating to the western mountains with pride bruised and wings weary. When the last enemy dragon disappeared over the horizon, the courtyard erupted in cheers. Zephyr flapped his wings joyfully, circling above Leora before landing safely in her arms. Calith stepped forward, spreading his wings wide, letting out a low, deep rumble of approval. "You have done more than I imagined," he said, his golden eyes shining. "The human's courage, Zephyr's bravery, it has saved the palace today. I see now that strength is not only in fire or claws, but also in wisdom, strategy, and heart." Leora smiled, brushing a hand over Zephyr's tiny head. "Thank you, Emperor." Zephyr is brave because he learned from someone who believed in him, and humans are strong when we work together with dragons. We can achieve more than we could alone. Calith nodded slowly. The lesson was clear. For centuries, dragons had relied on fear and power alone. But today, he had seen the quiet, unstoppable strength of humans, and he knew the empire could become stronger if dragons and humans worked together, learning from each other. Zephyr, exhausted but proud, curled in Leora's arms. He had faced fear, survived chaos, and helped defend the palace. The tiny dragon had grown stronger, not just in strength, but in courage and wisdom, and it had all begun because a human had believed in him. Calith watched the sunset over the mountains where the enemy had retreated. His thoughts swirled with possibilities. He realized that the Dragon Empire could not continue to thrive by relying on raw power alone. Humans had a place in the future, not as servants or weaklings, but as partners, thinkers, and guides. That night, the palace was quiet again. Zephyr rested safely in his nursery. Leora sat beside him, tired but satisfied, and Calith stood on his balcony, thinking. He realized that the courage of a single human had changed the course of a battle, and perhaps the course of the empire itself. The Emperor felt a new respect for humans and a growing admiration for Leora. Her intelligence, courage, and calm determination had saved lives, strengthened Zephyr, and opened Calith's eyes to possibilities he had never considered. The Dragon Emperor had always believed that power alone could rule the world. But now he understood that courage, patience, and cleverness, even in the smallest creatures, could shape the destiny of nations. As stars filled the sky, Calith spread his wings wide and let out a deep, steady rumble. It was not a roar of dominance, but a sound of reflection, gratitude, and newfound hope. The Dragon Empire had faced a trial, and it had been human courage, not dragon strength alone, that had turned the tide. For the first time, Calith truly understood the value of partnership. Dragons could soar with wings, breathe fire, and strike with claws, but humans had wisdom, courage, and creativity. Together, they could face any challenge, even threats stronger than themselves. And in the quiet of the palace courtyard, as Zephyr slept safely and Leora rested nearby, the Dragon Emperor realized that the future of his empire would be brighter than he had ever imagined. All because a human girl had believed in a tiny, fragile dragon and had shown that courage could be stronger than fear. The first light of dawn touched the Dragon Empire, spilling soft gold over the palace towers and the sprawling city below. The air was calm, but a sense of change lingered. After the battle with the neighboring clan, life had returned to the palace, but nothing would ever be the same. Emperor Calith stood on his balcony, wings partially spread as he gazed over his empire. The city streets were quiet for the morning, and the dragons stirred lazily in the warm sunlight. His thoughts, however, were not on power or dominion. They were on Zephyr, his fragile hatchling, and on Leora, the human girl who had changed everything. For weeks, Calith had watched Zephyr grow under Leora's guidance. The hatchling was no longer timid or frightened. He leapt from ledges with confidence, flapped his wings with strength, and even attempted short flights across the open courtyard. But more importantly, Zephyr had learned courage, the kind that could face challenges, adapt to danger, and trust in others. Leora stood nearby, adjusting Zephyr's wings and encouraging him to try again. "You can do this, Zephyr. I am right here," she whispered softly. The hatchling's eyes glimmered with determination as he lifted himself into the air, flapping steadily for several heartbeats before landing gracefully back on her arms. Calith stepped forward, his massive claws making the stone floor tremble slightly. "He is no longer weak," he said quietly, almost to himself. "You have done more than I imagined, human. He has grown stronger because of your courage and guidance." Leora smiled, brushing a gentle hand over Zephyr's tiny head. "Thank you, Emperor." But he had courage inside him already. He just needed someone to help him see it. Everyone has courage, dragons, humans, and even small hatchlings. Sometimes it just takes belief to make it visible. The Emperor considered her words carefully. For centuries, he had ruled with strength, power, and fear. Dragons had dominated humans, relying on wings, fire, and claws to assert their rule. But Leora had shown him another way, a way in which courage, care, and intelligence could transform weakness into strength. A gentle breeze rustled the banners above the palace, carrying the faint scent of flowers from the garden below. Calith turned to Leora. "Tell me, human, what would you have us do now? The neighboring clan has retreated. Our empire is safe." "But I see now that this is only the beginning. Strength alone is not enough. There must be something more." Leora looked thoughtful. "Yes, Emperor, strength is important, but courage, trust, and teamwork are even more important. You have seen it in Zephyr. You have seen it in us. Humans and dragons can be stronger together than apart. We can teach each other, learn from each other, and protect one another. That is how your empire can truly thrive." Calith felt a warmth in his chest. It was unlike anything he had ever felt before, not pride, not anger, not dominance, but a quiet hope. For the first time in centuries, he understood that power was not only in fire and claws. True power could be in belief, partnership, and understanding. The Emperor made a decision. He would announce a new era for the Dragon Empire, one in which humans and dragons would work together as equals. Not servants and rulers, but partners. Not simply creatures of fear and dominance, but allies of courage and intelligence. That afternoon, Calith summoned all the dragons of the Empire to the main courtyard. The massive creatures landed gracefully, their wings stirring the air in rhythmic beats. Zephyr, small but confident, perched proudly beside Leora. The human had been invited to witness the announcement, and she stood with calm dignity, her hands resting on the hatchling's head. Calith spread his wings wide and let out a low, resonant rumble. Every dragon paused, sensing the seriousness of the moment. "Dragons of the Empire," he began, his golden eyes scanning the crowd. "We have faced a trial. We have faced threats from outside, and we have seen weakness within. But today I have learned a lesson that even an emperor must acknowledge. Strength is not only in claws, wings, or fire. Strength is also in courage, care, and the wisdom to trust others." The dragons murmured among themselves, Some were skeptical, others curious. Kalith continued. This human Leora has shown us a new way. She has guided Zephyr, my hatchling, helping him grow stronger, braver, and wiser. And she has done so with courage and intelligence, not brute force. I have seen now that humans can be our partners, our allies, and our teachers. We will no longer rule them merely by strength. We will work with them, learn from them, and protect them as equals. A hush fell over the courtyard. Even the oldest, most stubborn dragons listened intently. Kalith's words carried the weight of centuries, and every dragon sensed that the future of their empire was about to change. Zephyr chirped happily, flapping his wings. He had grown confident, strong, and brave, and he had learned the meaning of trust. He looked at Leora, then at Kalith, and let out a joyful little roar. The sound echoed across the courtyard, and the dragons turned to see the small hatchling who had once been weak, now full of courage. Leora smiled, holding Zephyr close. See, she said softly. Even the smallest can be brave, and together humans and dragons can achieve more than we ever imagined. Kalith nodded, pride swelling in his chest. Yes, I see it now. Today marks a new era for the Dragon Empire, one of courage, wisdom, and partnership. Humans will have their place among us, not as weak subjects, but as equals. Together, we will be stronger, wiser, and braver than ever before. The dragons roared in approval, a sound that shook the palace towers and echoed across the city. It was a celebration not of dominance, but of understanding, partnership, and growth. Even the older, skeptical dragons could not deny the truth of Kalith's words. They had witnessed courage, intelligence, and care turn a weak hatchling into a brave young dragon. Zephyr flapped his wings proudly, chirping happily. He had faced fear, survived chaos, and now stood as a symbol of the new empire. And Leora, calm and smiling, had been the one to guide him, to show him the courage that had always been inside. That evening, Kalith and Leora walked together in the palace gardens. The hatchling followed closely, testing his wings on low jumps between the flower beds. The Emperor spoke quietly. Human, you have shown me more than I expected. You have changed not only Zephyr, but me. And I believe you have changed the future of this empire. Leora nodded. I only did what anyone with care and courage could do, but it is true. Humans can help dragons just as dragons can help humans. If we trust each other, we can face any challenge together. Kalith looked out over the palace, the city, and the distant mountains. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant gold and pink. He felt a sense of peace he had never known. The empire had faced danger, but it had survived. Zephyr had grown stronger. Humans and dragons had begun to understand each other, and the future, for the first time, seemed bright. Tomorrow, Kalith said softly, we will begin training together. Humans and dragons learning from one another, protecting one another, and growing together. The empire will never be the same. Zephyr chirped, flapping his wings joyfully as if he understood. Leora laughed softly, lifting him in her arms. Yes, she said, the empire will be stronger than ever because courage comes in many forms, even small wings and human hearts. That night, Kalith stood on his balcony once more, looking at the stars. The city below slept peacefully. Zephyr curled in his nest, safe and confident. Leora rested nearby, exhausted but content. And Kalith, the mighty dragon emperor, felt a sense of humility, hope, and gratitude he had never known. For centuries, he had believed that power alone could rule the world. But now he understood that true strength came from courage, trust, and partnership. Humans had shown him a lesson that even dragons could not teach, that even the smallest and weakest could change the course of history with patience, intelligence, and heart. As the moon rose high, casting silver light over the palace, Kalith spread his wings in quiet reflection. The Dragon Empire had entered a new era, one in which dragons and humans would work together, learn from each other, and face the future side by side. And it all began with a tiny hatchling, a brave human girl, and the courage to believe. The Dragon Emperor had watched the human Waitress carry his disabled baby dragon, and his life and his empire had been changed forever.